Welcome, Skillshare citizens, to our first lesson, our short course on understanding wine, entitled Stop Thinking and Start Drinking. Because a lot of folks are kind of intimidated by wine. It's got all these fancy names and labels from all these different places in Europe. Ooh, it's too much, I can't understand it, and therefore I must just keep drinking cheap beer and liquor. No. Wine is taking over in America, and not only is it an awesome beverage in and of itself, but it's awesomely good for you, and it's great with food and with family and friends. There is a true wine revolution going on in our society, more and more people drinking this stuff, and you are going to be expected to know about this stuff in business settings and family settings, and you know what? It's just a great product. So let's get to it and do it. Let's start drinking. Stop thinking about it so much, although there will be some thought process involved, of course. Now, this short course is, again, mostly to get you into the game, get you comfortable opening wine, drinking wine, evaluating wine, but not like a professional, just as a regular person, and really to unsnob wine. Now, if you want to become a snob, good for you. This will be a good start. But I really think wine is very democratic, very open, very awesome. It's for everybody, and so it's not about becoming a snob, and it's about being able to dethrone anyone who tries to use wine knowledge as a tool of imperialism over you. So let's get democratic here with the wine and open it up. Now, this whole course, again, a short course, has kind of three major sections I'm looking at. We're going to walk the walk, we're going to talk the talk, and then we're going to teach you some things about how to stock your shelf, your personal shelf at home, your cellar, if you like. Walking the walk's all about, hey, let's start drinking this stuff. Opening, decanting, picking, all that stuff. Talking the talk is, hey, let's learn the language of wine together. It's not as challenging as it appears as an outsider. And finally, stocking your shelf is, tips for actually how you buy wine online and in stores, how you can get the most out of your local stores in terms of tastings, and where you would store stuff at to make it last the longest, or even overnight on your counter. Now, having said, already referenced, getting to know your local stores. Location is everything, not just in real estate. It's everything with wine, too. Most wines are named for the place they're from, or at least it's a significant part. So we say, oh, what is this wine? Where is this wine from? A California wine, an Italian wine, a Tuscan wine, a Bordeaux? These are all places. But we also focus a lot on the grape. Is this a Chardonnay or a Cabernet Sauvignon? So we're going to talk about this kind of dichotomy of labeling wines and understanding wines throughout this whole short course. Location is key, though, and we're going to learn some locations about wine in the world, but also it's more crucial to where you're at right now and the wine stores that are near you. I'm actually filming on location from a wine store, no less, here in Blacksburg, Virginia, from the Vintage Cellar, the most awesome little wine shop in Southwest Virginia, if not across the entire Mid-Atlantic region. And if you find yourself in Blacksburg, by all means, you should stop by the Vintage Cellar, because one of our first assignments is to find the closest 4 wine stores, wine shops, or wine bars closest to you. You can do 40 if you like, but as a minimum 4. And you're not just going to find these places. I want you to make contacts at these places, get to know personnel at these places, and most importantly, if it's a wine shop, find out when they're doing free tastings. You'll be amazed how much wine experience you can gain for the low, low price of nothing at free tastings. So figure out the 4 closest places that have something to do with wine. Start to make ties and contacts at these places and find out the schedule of when they're doing tastings. That's your assignment 1. Hey, you know what? Let's do some fun with location as well. I just said we're in Blacksburg, Virginia. I have no idea where all you Skillshare people are at who are watching this video right now. So, just as a little geo competition, the person that's the closest, taking this course, the closest person to this actual store, I'll give you a bottle of wine. And the person who's geographically furthest from this store, I'll give you 2. So in the comments section or Q&A or during our online live office hours, hit me up and let's figure out who wins bottle 1 and 2 bottles for prize number 2. All right, that's the fun stuff. There's your first assignments already set out. But we want to go ahead and get drinking. So what you need to do for every single one of these lessons, no matter when you're watching them, no matter where you're watching, you should have an open glass of wine in front of you. Doesn't have to be expensive, can be cheap, can be boxed, can be from a screw cap, does not matter to me. But I want you to get some wine and go ahead and have it open and be drinking while you're watching these videos. If you don't have any wine open, hit pause now. Okay, now you're back because you have some wine in hand. I want you to keep that bottle in front of you because now for the rest of this brief intro lesson, I'm going to talk about some general terms that will help you get into the ballpark of understanding wine and thinking about it and being able to converse about wine. These are just general terms to know, and I call them the three sets of three, the trifecta of trifectas, general terms. 3 shall be the number of the counting, and the number of the counting shall be 3. Let's start with the first of our 3s, and that is there are 3 major steps in actually producing wine. Yeah, that's it, just 3. Now, we could break it down and have a whole course just on wine production, but we're not going to do that. We're worried about drinking, not necessarily producing this stuff, but it's good to know this. The first step in winemaking is actually called viticulture. Viti, V-I-T-I, culture. Viticulture is the art and science of growing grapes. Grapes are the most produced fruit on planet Earth by a wide margin, and that is because their number one use is making wine. And there's billions and billions of gallons of wine made every year. Now, you think of grapes as table grapes, black grapes, green grapes you get from the grocery store. Those actually aren't made into wine. Not too much, or if they are, not into very good wine. But other grapes, a whole variety of other grapes, mostly of European origin, are the ones used for wine creation. Things like Chardonnay, a Pinot Noir, a Cabernet Sauvignon, ones you probably have heard of by name. The person who grows those grapes is the viticulturist, and that's their specialty, to grow grapes specifically for wine production. Okay, so viticulture, you got to grow the grapes because you need the sugars from the grapes to actually ferment into wine, and that's step 2. Viniculture, V-I-N-I, is the art and science of the production of wine itself. Fermentation, where you take grape juice that you've pressed out, add in some yeast, although they occur naturally, and it's going to ferment into this awesome beverage that we now know as wine. And again, it's an art and science to that as well. Viticulture's the grapes, viticulture's wine production. The only other step, and sometimes it's even optional, is maturation, to mature the wine. So you grow the grapes, you make the wine, and you could sell it at that point, put it in a bottle and go, or you could put it in a barrel. You could age it. You could let it mellow and chill out and continue to evolve. That's the maturation process. And really, that's it. That's the 3 major steps in producing this awesome stuff that we call wine. All right, let's get to the second set of 3s, and this one's much more practical to understanding the wine that you actually have in front of you right this second. The second set of 3s is there are 3 major types of wine, 3 major types. And very quickly, still wine, usually referred to as table wine, sparkling, and fortified. Still wine is the wines that you've had the most of in life. These are, again, generically called just table wines. These are the fermented juice of grapes that is usually somewhere between 8 to 14% in alcohol. Some big reds can get up to 15 or 16% alcohol. But this is basic standard table wine. This is probably 99% of the wine that you'll see in the grocery store or your wine shop. It's probably 99% of the wines that you've ever drank. It's probably 99% of the wines you ever will drink is standard, good old-fashioned, still wine. And it's called still because the next type of wine we're going to talk about is sparkling, and it's fizzy, it's bubbly, it has action. But table wine, or still wine, is not charged with CO2. It's good to go. Got it? And here are just some examples that you have a white, a rosé, and a red. I bet you've had some white. I'm sure you've had some reds. The rosés people are a little scared of. The pinkies in the middle. These are your 3 kind of major types of table wine, but we'll talk more about that at a different lecture. All right, so that's your table wine category. Type number 2, major types of wine. Sparkling, whee, the fun fizzy stuff. And we have a couple of examples. One champagne and one sparkling wine from somewhere else. And I want to go ahead and speak to that immediately. Sparkling wine just means wine that has bubbles. It's charged with CO2. This happens actually naturally as part of the fermentation process. When yeast are eating sugar and converting it to alcohol, they also are releasing CO2. If you naturally just cap the bottle as it's fermenting, the beverage will charge itself with CO2, and thus it's fizzy. Like Coca-Cola, except all that crap's fake and not good for you, all right? So CO2 charged wine is sparkling wine. Okay, now I said we had a champagne and a sparkling wine. Let's go ahead and start talking about location, some important geo facts to know about wine. All champagne is sparkling wine, but not all sparkling wine is champagne. What? What does that mean? Sparkling wine is a general category of wine. You can have sparkling wine from South Africa, you can have sparkling wine from Virginia, you can have sparkling wine from Timbuktu, okay? And there are sparkling wines made all over France. But champagne is just one type of sparkling wine made from one specific geographic location. That location is named Champagne. It's legally, geographically defined. If you make sparkling wine a certain way from the actual region of Champagne, you can label it Champagne. All other sparkling wines from around the planet just called sparkling wine. Don't use champagne as a generic term like many Americans do. That's just bad karma. French people will also try to kick you in your arse, all right? So sparkling wine is your second major category, and these are quite delightful, awesome wines. I don't know why this is. I don't pretend to be a biologist or a nutritionist, but there's something about this CO2 in solution that actually helps or facilitates or expedites the movement of alcohol into your bloodstream. Yeah, I know. So you actually can get a little drunker, a little faster off of sipping a nice champagne or sparkling wine. Actually, chilling a wine will help facilitate the movement of alcohol to your bloodstream too, and we usually serve sparkling wines chilled, so it's a double whammy. The fizzy gets you a little dizzy right quick. But that's the second major category of wines, and this leaves us to our third major type of wine, and that is fortified. Fortified wines are table wines that have been fortified with pure alcohol, usually a brandy or a neutral spirit, stuff that we would call liquor. And it is much higher in alcoholic strength because it is a distilled product. So a brandy, or really any liquor you would buy in the liquor store, is somewhere on the order of 30, 40, 50, or 60% alcohol by volume. If you take a neutral brandy and pour it into a table wine, you have fortified it in alcoholic strength. And that is, in essence, what fortified wines are. The two most famous ones you've probably heard of are port and sherry. There are a few other bizarre ones that maybe you haven't heard about, like Madeira, but the basic premise is the same. These are wines, right? Buy them in the wine store. You don't have to go to the liquor store to get them. They're wines, but they're typically higher in alcoholic strength because they've been fortified. So in the 18, 19, 21, 22% alcohol range. And we're going to talk a whole lecture just on fortified, maybe even sparkling wines too. But that's another major category, and that's your big three. So the second trifecta of terms to know: three types of wine, still or table wine, sparkling wine, the fizzy, and fortified. Okay, that leaves us for the last set of three. The last trifecta to know are very generic terms, and they will help you understand the importance of location that a wine is from versus the grape content that's in the wine itself. Again, maybe these broader abstract terms don't mean anything to you yet, but they're going to very soon, because the three terms I want you to know are varietal versus blended, and also this term called vintage. Okay, what does varietal wine mean? A varietal wine, ding, 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 are wines that are made primarily from one specific grape. Now, there's no hard and fast legal definition to this, but if you see the name of a grape on a bottle, and it's pretty prominent, in fact, if it's the biggest word on the label, or at least the most recognizable word you see on the label, that typically means, and I'm just putting this in broad terms, that 80% of that wine, usually at a bare minimum, is probably made of that one grape. Usually it's closer to 90 or 95, and in some cases it's 100% that grape. Now, what am I talking about with grapes? Okay, we're not talking about places. We're not talking about Bordeaux or Tuscany or California. We're talking about the grape itself. Grape terms that you've probably heard are like Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon, Sangiovese, Sauvignon Blanc. Those are the names of grape species, subspecies. And that means when you see it prominently featured on the label, that the winemaker is saying, I'm expressing this grape. It is mostly this exact grape, so you're going to get mostly the flavor of that grape. You know, the winemaker has their local spin on it, their terroir, how that grape does for them in that location, but it's really mostly about the grape. This is Pinot Noir in this bottle. This one is a Chardonnay. It's featured right there on the label. They're telling you Chardonnay. It's mostly Chardonnay in this bottle. And again, to sum up, a varietal wine is any wine made predominantly with one grape variety. 80, 90, maybe 100% of just Pinot Noir or just Chardonnay or just Sauvignon Blanc. Got it? Varietal wine. By the way, little side note, let me go ahead and get ahead of myself. One of the reasons why that so many wines are now labeled by variety is because it's the way that us Americans and us New Worlders understand wine. We don't necessarily inherently know what Bordeaux is, or Tuscany is, or the Mosel region. Those are places. So they easily confuse us. Grapes we get. Merlot, I got that. I know what Merlot tastes like. So that's why there's a great proliferation of varietal wines on the market, and more people, even from Europe, are putting the name of the grape variety on the label, mostly for us, so that we understand it. And this is case in point. Okay, a French wine that's putting the word Pinot Noir, big as day, up on top because they're saying, hey, people don't know the region we're from, but they understand what Pinot Noir is, so let's tell them it's Pinot Noir. So varietal wine, a wine made predominantly from one single grape variety, thus the term varietal wine. In contrast to that, well, they're not a huge contrast, but in contrast to that is the second term, a blended wine. For most of human history, wines were mostly blended because it really wasn't about just having a Merlot or just having a Sangiovese. It was more about, hey, how do we craft the best tasting wine from the place that we're at? So we have this grape that does really well. So we grow Merlot really well, but we also grow these other things. We grow Cabernet Sauvignon really well and Sangiovese really well. Well, hey, why don't we just mix them together like a chef making soup to make the best tasting product we can? And if you do that and you use more than 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4 or 10 different grapes, you are making a blended wine. It may even be the case that, in the case of Chianti, Chianti's trying to produce a wine called Chianti. They're not necessarily trying to produce a varietal wine. They're not saying, hey, this is a Sangiovese. We want you to taste the Sangiovese. Even though Sangiovese is the bulk constituent of Chianti, they actually blend in a whole bunch of other grapes, okay? Thus, it's a blended wine. Most Bordeaux's are blended wine. Yes, they have mostly Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon in it, but they got other stuff going on in it as well. And it's never in the exact proportions year to year. So blended wines, think again more of a chef in the kitchen is going to make the best product possible to display the best taste possible from his particular place year to year. Blended wines. To restate, for most of human history, this is the way you would have did it. It's like, well, what grew good this year? This grape didn't do so good, so let's put in a couple other things to spice it up. Let's put in some of this for backbone and acid. Let's put in some of this for fruity flavor. If you're doing that, you're making a blended wine. By the way, I think they're making a resurgence. A lot of European regions produce blended wines, but you can now even get things like California Field Red, which is a blended wine. They're just going out in the field and saying, hey, what grew good this year? Let's produce a really good product from this. Anytime you see the words just red wine or white wine on a label, that's usually also an indicator that it's a blended wine. If they say Chardonnay, that's a varietal wine. If they mixed in more than a few things, they're just going to be like, it's a red wine. Got it? Okay? So varietal versus blended. Both can be awesome and delicious. It's just a different way of understanding them. And finally, the last of our trifecta of terms, we've kind of already been dancing around. And that is that every year you're going to produce grapes. Grapes are harvested once a year. And this other general term to know is vintage. Most wine bottles you'll see, really the great majority, I'd say, in a wine shop, will have a date on them. Where's the date here? There it is, 2006 from Clarendon Hills in Australia. This Grenache, oh look, they're telling me what grape is in there. This is a varietal wine. So it's Grenache from Clarendon, and 2006 is the actual vintage year. And what vintage indicates is the year in which the grapes were grown and harvested, okay? And harvested. It's not telling you when the wine was made necessarily. It wasn't telling you when it was blended. It's not telling you how long it hung out in a barrel. It's simply saying these grapes were grown and harvested in the year 2006. Why is that important? Well, it becomes more important the more that you understand and know about wine, in that maybe 2006 was a really bad year in Australia. You as a consumer should probably know that. And if you see wines from a region and all of them for 2005 cost $100 and all of them from 2006 cost $5, that's tipping you off. That might not have been a very good vintage year. The wine might not have come out as good as they liked it. It's also actually more good to know about the good years, which is what a lot of wine writers write about. So you'll say here, oh, 2007 was a fantastic year in Tuscany, and the prices will be significantly inflated. Again, they're talking about the year the grapes were grown, because viticulture is such an important part of this process. Even though people, humans, make the wine, the grapes are expressing the place, expressing the climate, and expressing how good that year was. You can only make really great wine out of really great grapes in a really great year. So that's why it's important to understand and at least recognize the vintage of the particular harvest of the particular wine. Got it? Okay. That's the trifecta of trifectas. That's it. You just summed it all up. So we know our sets of three general terms to know about wine. And now, put that glass back in front of you to finish here this beginning intro lesson. It was required that you press pause to go get a wine if you didn't have one. So now pull up the bottle that you have and tell me, look at it and define it in terms of some of the things we've talked about. Does it have a vintage year on it? Is it a varietal wine? If so, what variety? Or is it a blended wine? Is it a still or table wine? Is it fortified or sparkling? It's likely a table or still wine, but I don't know. You're the one that has the wine in front of you. So now you can look at this wine in a whole new way already and say, oh, here are some terms that I now understand exactly what this wine's all about and what they're trying to do with it. Boom. Hopefully you just learned something. If not, hang in there. Now we're going to get to, for the next several lessons, walking the walk. That is, let's get some bottles open and start doing the sniffy sniff and the swirly swirl and figuring out then how to talk the talk, and then again to finish up our course, how to stock your personal shelf. But let's start that up next.